Jaxson Dart is finally looking like the Heisman candidate everyone said he was in the offseason.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we dive into how Lane Kiffin's simple but effective game plan finally unlocked Jaxson Dart against a tough Oklahoma defense. In the second half of the game, Dart took control and explosive plays started just coming naturally, letting the offense breathe and stop pressing. With that breakthrough, this offensive unit can now play looser, which can make all the difference in the world going forward. We also talk about Joyless Murder Ball and why that is the way, along with some of the weird personnel decisions right now that we're seeing 8 games into this season. So stick around for that. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network, Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, or even Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy, who's taking on Zach Blackerby from Locked On Auburn this weekend. They offer great perspectives on the SEC and college football, and heck, even Ole Miss. So check them out. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Really interesting stuff. Today's show, we're talking about the what to watch for episode this week going into the Arkansas Razorbacks game. Jaxson Dart looked more like Jaxson Dart is supposed to look against Oklahoma. We'll explain why. We'll explain what that means and how things could look moving forward. Number 2, Joyless Murder Ball. Will it appear during the Arkansas Razorbacks? Ole Miss needs a running game for that to happen. So that leads into the third point. Ulysses Bentley will become the poster child for this season if it gets to 3 losses. Pretty much the only way that does not become the main storyline and poster child of this season is if Ole Miss makes the playoffs. But if they do not, it will be all about Ulysses Bentley. My main takeaway from this show, though, is going to be Jaxson Dart finally looked like the player hyped in the preseason against Oklahoma. Really interesting stuff indeed. Now, Jaxson Dart played a really good game. Now, he had a slow start. The start of the Oklahoma game looked a lot like we've seen over the previous few weeks, to where he just didn't quite look right. Everything looked weird. Jaxson Dart slid in weird times when he would normally run over defenders. He wasn't playing like himself. Something seemed off. But Ole Miss's game plan, through a series of short passes and using that to make the defensive line look up and respect the territory within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, eventually opened up the big shot organic plays for Jaxson Dart to take advantage of. And in the third quarter, he looked exactly like you would expect Jaxson Dart to look in a game that Ole Miss just dominated that third quarter. Like, we're going to talk about that in the next segment. It is the definition of what Joyless Murder Ball is designed to do. The definition of it. And if Ole Miss can stick to the bit, they can commit in the first half. In the second half, all of this stuff is going to open up, and you'll see exactly how it goes. And that is winning football. There's an example of that through Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and all those. That is winning football games, and a way to win football games is playing that way. So we'll have to see if Ole Miss is willing to commit to the bit against Arkansas. But Jaxson Dart, because of those short passes, Caden Priestcorn had 4 or 5 catches on the day. 4 or 5 different receivers had 3 or more catches. The ball got spread out to everybody. We talked about that for weeks leading into it. And if Ole Miss can take that game plan and reincorporate Trey Harris into that game plan, you're going to see Jaxson Dart really take off in the last 4 games of the season, where Arkansas, Georgia, Florida, and Mississippi State are on the menu. Literally, if Ole Miss plays like they did in the third quarter, actually the second half of the game, they're not losing this season. I don't care that they play Georgia. They're not losing a game if they can consistently put a game together like they did in the third quarter. The stats were so unbelievably one-sided. The Wake Forest game, the Furman game, the Middle Tennessee game were not likely to have stats as one-sided as that third quarter was against Oklahoma. Literally, Ole Miss played to its complete potential in that third quarter of the game, and a lot of that has to do with Jaxson Dart waking up. A lot of that has to do with Ole Miss not messing around and helping the other team. I talked about all the time. Ole Miss plays better when they do not assist the other team. And if Ole Miss doesn't assist the other team, it's really hard to beat this Ole Miss team. So the goal that Jaxson Dart has, and the goal that Ole Miss football has, going in these last 4 games is to be hard to beat. If you are hard to beat with the amount of talent that is on the football field, you're going to win out. Like I said, I do not care that Georgia is on the schedule. Now, you have to handle Arkansas this weekend, and playing in Fayetteville, Arkansas is so weird for Ole Miss. Literally, I have seen Arkansas score a touchdown on an Ole Miss kickoff return. It was on that play that the big story the week after that was, hey, do you know you could just let the ball hit in the end zone and it's blown dead? And it's like everybody after that started doing that. But Arkansas scored a touchdown on an Ole Miss kickoff return. That happened in Fayetteville. Ole Miss, though, has won 4 out of the last 6 games against Arkansas. They lost in 2020, that weird Matt Corral 6 interception game. And they lost in 2022, which was that weird Lane Kiffin, Auburn, Willie, Woney, all of that, where the announcers were even talking about that during the game. So both of those situations have been weird type performances. But I do kind of digress of what's going on. Ole Miss has the talent to win this game. The line has gone up to Ole Miss being favored by 7.5 points. The over-under has gone down to 53.5. So they're thinking the game is going to be somewhere in the ballpark of a 31-23 type football game, which that makes sense. That's a cover for Ole Miss in both ways. But Arkansas, as we talked yesterday, is going to be difficult. Jaxson Dart needs to play like he did against Oklahoma. And if he replicates that and starts stacking those games on top of each other, by the end of the year, Ole Miss is going to be a rolling ball of butcher knives. They're going to be extremely hard to deal with, but they have to win this next game first. This is potentially the biggest game in Ole Miss football history if they win, because of what winning this game would mean. Because of everything that goes along ancillary to winning the football game. It's not because Arkansas, who's a 5-3 team, they're a good team, but they're not a great team, is on the schedule and you're beating them. It's because of what it sets up. It's because how it goes. And Ole Miss getting an extra day game because, hey, super awesome SEC. Let's give LSU 37 night games. Let's give Ole Miss 37 day games, and let's call it fair. But it's a situation where if Jaxson Dart can replicate what he did in the third quarter of that Oklahoma game, Ole Miss is going to win this game. Ole Miss is going to win next week. Ole Miss is going to win the remaining games on their schedule. And I don't care who they play. If they make the playoffs, the whole 9 yards, if Ole Miss plays like they did in the third quarter of that Oklahoma game, they're not losing to anybody. Period. It doesn't matter who they play. As long as Ole Miss doesn't help out the opponent like they did in the third quarter, and they were dominant offensively because it was set up through that basic joyless murder ball mindset to help out the defense. Jaxson Dart saw big plays and explosive plays organically opening up. The pass blocking was actually pretty good in this game. The run blocking, not so much. That needs some work, and we're going to talk about that in the third segment. But if you look at all of this, Jaxson Dart being the player that everybody assumed he would be, the football team looking better at that moment, that's not necessarily a surprise. But we are happy that it happened. Jaxson Dart, if he can replicate what he did against Oklahoma, they're going to be fine in Fayetteville. I don't care about all of the House of Horrors stuff and all of that stuff, because if both teams play their best, Ole Miss has better football players than Arkansas. Ole Miss has to help Arkansas out a little bit to win the game. And we saw in the first half exactly what that looks like. If the penalty stuff rears its head again, that's going to be problematic. If turnovers and momentum swings and things like that, non-winning football appears, that can affect that. But if Ole Miss plays like they did in the second half, just the second half, Ole Miss is going to win this football game. Taylor Green's a really good quarterback, but Ole Miss does have the athletes to match up and spy a Taylor Green offensively as well. So the third quarter against OU was a masterclass in Joyless Murder Ball at its finest. Relentless, punishing, unstoppable. Do not miss the full breakdown of how it all came together and how it is the future. You know, Game Time is your place to get Ole Miss tickets with a killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. You know, there's not a bad seat in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium or the Pavilion, but Game Time allows you to see exactly what the view from that seat would look like before you buy the tickets. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. They take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss history, I might even be able to help you out with tickets as well. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Have y'all ever heard of the South's favorite pickle? I'm talking about Stewart's Cajun Dill Pickles, of course. If you think you don't like pickles, it's probably because you have not tried these. These pickles are so fresh and crunchy with just the right amount of Cajun kick to keep you coming back for more. And they're not just delicious, they're also handmade by family-owned companies on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, so every bite is packed with authentic Southern flavor. But Stewart doesn't just stop at pickles. They've got pickled green beans, okras, carrots, asparagus too. Perfect for spicing up your snack game. You can find these amazing products at Rouse's, Sullivan's, Corner Market in Hattiesburg, and even some Winn-Dixie's along the Gulf Coast. Or if you prefer shopping online, head to thepickledstore.com. Make sure you give them a like and a follow on Facebook and Instagram. And when you shop local and try these pickles, I guarantee you will not be disappointed. Stewart's Cajun Dill Pickles, the South's favorite pickle. You know, Ole Miss against Oklahoma in the third quarter actually had a masterclass of Joyless Murder Ball. It is what the first half of games are supposed to do. If you do it and you stick to it and you commit to the bit, by the end of the game, everything should open up. We've seen this probably 100 times against Alabama and against Georgia and all these football games that we've watched to where it's close at the beginning. It's close at the beginning. You feel hope. You feel like you have a chance, and all of a sudden, big play, turnover, big play, and it's 24-10, and you know that there's no shot. Ole Miss has a chance to replicate that as well. And the third quarter of this Ole Miss-Oklahoma game was an absolute masterclass of that. Ole Miss outscored Oklahoma 13-0 in the third quarter. Oklahoma went into halftime up 14-10. Now, it should have been 13-7. Let's digress on that. We have all talked about committing to the bit, but let's just go 14-10 to start the third quarter. Ole Miss comes out and gets a 3-and-out at the beginning of the quarter. Just bam, 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 punt the ball. Ole Miss gets the ball, drives it straight down the field, scores a touchdown, and goes up 16-14. Kicks off to Oklahoma. Oklahoma, 3-and-out, boom, boom, boom. Punts the ball back. Ole Miss goes down and scores a touchdown, and it's 26-13, and the game is essentially over. And if you look at the stats of what happened in this third quarter, just in the third quarter, Oklahoma had one first down. The whole quarter, they had one first down. They had -5 yards passing in the third quarter. They had 28 yards rushing, 12 total plays. Ole Miss, on the other hand, went for 19 total plays, not even a whole bunch of plays. The explosives opened up. Jaxson Dart was 10 of 11 throwing the football. They had 201 yards of total offense. They were 3 for 3 on third down and 1 for 1 in the red zone. When you look at Jaxson Dart, he was 10 of 11 for 185 yards. Whenever I talk about in the first segment about how Jaxson Dart kind of really actually started looking like he was supposed to, this is what I mean. In the second half of this ball game, he had 3 incomplete passes. He was unbelievably efficient, and the explosive plays that had organically opened up was able to do that. And once Ole Miss got up by 2 scores with this defense, even without Walter Nolan, Ole Miss was able to really put the clamps down on what was going on with the Oklahoma Sooners. After this game, Ole Miss ended up number 2 in the country in sacks with 34. They're one behind, I think, Boise State. I'm not sure about that, though. Ole Miss is number 1 nationally in tackles for loss with over 10 over the number 2 team. And they are number 1 in the country in scoring defense at 11 as well. And you're seeing a major star turn happen in front of your eyes. The young true sophomore, Suntarine Perkins, has 41 tackles, 12 TFLs, 5 quarterback hurries, 8.5 sacks. He is leading the Southeastern Conference in sacks, and he has been the SEC Defensive Player of the Week or Co-Defensive Player of the Week 2 out of the last 3 weeks. You're seeing a major league star turn by Suntarine Perkins, and it's being overshadowed by people wondering what happened to the offense because of remembering what it looked like when Matt Corral was here whenever they had to go because they didn't have a defense. This Ole Miss team is going to play to their defense in their last 4 games, and they should play to their defense because they have 3 pass rushers, if you include Princely Amamuellen with Jared Ivey, that are elite in the Southeastern Conference. 3 of the top 20 sack members in the whole nation reside on Ole Miss's defensive line. And the guy that was supposed to be the backup to Princely Amamuellen is leading all of them with 8.5. So when we talk about the need for Joyless Murder Ball, this is what we mean. Ole Miss had the ball for 8 minutes and 15 seconds in that third quarter that we talk about against Oklahoma. If you multiply that out over 4 quarters, Ole Miss ends up with 33 plus minutes of time of possession in that game. That's very unlike what we have grown accustomed to with Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss converted some first downs. They stayed on schedule. They used their tight ends. They're multiple weapons. And the problem that has developed for Ole Miss over the season, Ole Miss is in a position to win all these games defensively and all of that. But you're going to hear people talk about how if Ole Miss doesn't make the playoffs, it's because they're not good enough or they just weren't that good. You're going to hear that all the time. They just weren't that good. And that is a take of a person that doesn't know what they're talking about. Honestly, it just is. Because that is of the understanding that everything in preparing this team going into the game is 100% translatable. And no mistakes can be made from the spring on creating this team. And I'm going to tell you about in the next segment that I think the Ole Miss spring practice this year, where they were so afraid of depth charts, they were absolutely afraid of that second transfer portal window to where they did not do depth charts. And now we're 8 games into the season, and Lane Kiffin still doesn't know who his best offensive linemen are. A unit that cohesion means everything. The offensive line is struggling, and they're blaming it on the transfer portal. And I say, nay. I blame it on fear of the transfer portal after spring practice and the way they designed spring practice. Listen, Ole Miss prides itself on outside the box thinking. We don't think outside the box. We create another box. Lane Kiffin said that at SEC Media Days in 2023. Some of those things work. Some of those things do not. Football is done the way it's done because over the last 150 years, there's been enough of a sample size to figure out what works. So when you go outside the box, it's a gamble. It is a real gamble. And Ulysses Bentley hardly playing. We're going to talk about him in the next segment. Hardly playing 8 games into the season when Ole Miss is struggling to run the football is baffling to Ole Miss fans. Dominic Thomas, Rashad Amos, hell, even Logan Diggs, if he's healthy, where are these players? All of these players that were brought in, where are they? When you look at the Senior Bowl roster that gets put out for people looking at the NFL, you're going to see a lot of Ole Miss names on it. When you see players get drafted, you're going to see a lot of Ole Miss names on it. This is probably going to be the most successful NFL draft in Ole Miss football history. This season is not because Ole Miss wasn't good enough. It was because mistakes were made in the preparation of this team. It is because coaches who are notoriously slow decision makers didn't have enough film, and there wasn't an established hierarchy to make decisions later on in the year. Structurally, that was the problem. It wasn't because this team wasn't good enough. This team has all the talent in the world. It wasn't because the Ole Miss fans shouldn't have invested money in all of those players through the Grove Collective. No, those players are fine. If Ole Miss misses the playoffs this year, the story of this playoff season, the face of this season is going to be Ulysses Bentley IV. And it is because of decisions that were made 6 months ago. For everybody that says spring practice is not important, this is exhibit A, B, and C of why that's crap. People might not want spring practice to be important, but it is, because coaches are notoriously slow decision makers. They need hours upon hours upon hours of film to make a decision, because if they don't do that, they just don't know. Their muscle memory takes over, and you end up with mistakes getting made. It's just the way that football is done. And Ole Miss 8 games into their season, not knowing who their best offensive linemen are is problematic at best. Them not having cohesion on the offensive line, that's problematic at best. The defense and all of that stuff, fantastic. They are doing exactly what needs to be done. But there are certain units and certain people on this team that need the reps. And Jaxson Dart hardly played during spring practice because he was recovering from that injury. Juice Wells sat out all of spring practice. All of that valuable film, all of the reps were lost, and now personnel-wise, there is a problem. So we'll see exactly how that goes as well. So 8 games in, and the Ulysses Bentley story is shaping the season. If Ole Miss misses the playoff, this could be the moment we all look back on. Don't miss this breakdown of what it means for the Rebels moving forward. So let's talk about the running back position, because right now the running back position is not looking great. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're just so predictable in the run game. And there's certain things that Ole Miss did 2 or 3 years ago that they do not do right now that would make them a little bit less predictable in the run game. Now, a lot of that has to do, and I'm going to say doesn't have, because we don't know if they have it, but they're trying to run inside with an 180-pound running back. And whenever it looks good, it looks good. You get what you had against Wake Forest, and he is the 2nd or 3rd leading rusher in the whole SEC, but that is not in SEC games. The run game in SEC games has not looked good. In fact, I think the only running back that has gone over 100 yards in an SEC game is Ulysses Bentley. And Ulysses Bentley has, let's see. Let's look at this real quick. I'm trying to bring this up. Henry Parrish has 120 carries for 656 yards and 10 touchdowns. He's a 180-pound running back. He's a smaller back, and for some reason, he doesn't look explosive. In my opinion, he's a solid 2 in the running back room. He is somebody that you put in there after the starter needs a break, and he can make some plays. Henry Parrish is good enough to do this. I think he's at a career high in rushing yards as we speak right now. Ulysses Bentley has 32 carries, 178 yards, and a touchdown. 11 of those carries and about 111 of those yards came against LSU a week ago or 2 weeks ago or something like that. He had 5 carries for 5 yards against Oklahoma. He has more explosiveness than Henry Parrish Jr. He has more size than Henry Parrish Jr. I think he would help this running back room out greatly. But the problem happens even after Ulysses Bentley. What the fans want is to know that effort is being made to find something that works. Dominic Thomas, for instance, he has 12 carries, 90 yards. He's ran the ball pretty well in games that have been against completely overmatched teams. I get that. But what would he look like against an SEC defense? What would Dominic Thomas look like? What would Rashad Amos look like that had over 1,000 yards a year ago at Miami of Ohio? He's 235 pounds. He is a big guy. He could fill the role of being that thumper that I talked about in the offseason that Ole Miss needed, and we all thought that Ole Miss got that with Rashad Amos. But personnel-wise, it has been weird at the very least this season. The personnel decisions that I attribute straight back to spring practice and them just basically overlooking spring practice instead of trying to maximize every single rep to have exactly a picture in front of you to come out in the fall and get going. Listen, if a player transferred out after spring practice, so what? It doesn't matter, especially when all of these players were brought in and hardly any of them seemingly get used. Ole Miss this year has been a very weird game plan from start to finish. It's one of the reasons, like I said, when people say Ole Miss just wasn't good enough at the end of the season, I'm just going to laugh at them. It's basically going to be a football IQ test of what's going on because the talent is on this roster. The talent is all over this roster. So we'll see exactly how it goes. And should Ole Miss get that third loss, I will get more in depth into what happened in the spring and all of this going into the fall camp and all of that. So I will back that up. But I just want to say this personnel decision with Ulysses Bentley, he is a guy that can legitimately help Ole Miss in this game. Can really help Ole Miss in this game. But Ole Miss needs to use him from time to time. Arkansas, they're pretty good up front. Landon Jackson, defensive end's a good player. So pass rushing and pass protection for Julius Buelow and Diego Pounds is going to be very important. We'll have to see if Jaden Williams is back playing in this game as well. But if Ole Miss has the game plan that they had in the Oklahoma game, they're going to move the ball. They're going to open everything up because, again, I say it all the time. I'm unbelievably repetitive. I get that. But Ole Miss, when this offense is performing well, tortures linebackers. When the linebacker is not worried about having to go right and left or move forward, and they can just sink back and it's going to be very predictable and they're going to be able to stop the offense. But whenever the linebackers cannot be right, a lot of stuff opens up. Caden Prescorn caught a touchdown against Oklahoma that was a direct result of the linebackers not knowing exactly how they should handle this. You had people moving all the time. It was off of the fake screening. You had linebackers. They were at different levels. And in between those levels, the ball hit, and then the touchdown happened with Billy Bowman in pursuit. When this offense is really good, it tortures linebackers. And this offense has a chance to fix everything over the next 4 games. But this is the biggest 10 days in Ole Miss football history. And Ole Miss has to go up to Fayetteville and get a win in a place where, of course, you would have to go to Fayetteville and get a win to get ready for that game potentially against the Georgia Bulldogs. We'll all see exactly how that goes as well. So thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves in offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast out there. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC Podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And exciting news, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It's our texting program that sends you notifications on anything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we go constantly. So don't miss out. The link is down in the description below. For those of you watching on YouTube, we will send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Hotty toddy, everyone.